once again, welcome back to our series on the glories of our beloved Sri Vrindavan Dhama. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale, Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane, Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pacharane, Nivishesha Shunyavadi, Pashchaja Deshatarane. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, after our last lecture the other day, I turned around and I looked at the library behind me, and I thought, what should I speak about next? And just at that moment, my cell phone rang, and it was a lady who asked if her son could speak to me. I said, sure. So the young boy got on the phone and he introduced himself. And he said, Maharaj, thank you for the nice class. I replied, well, thank you, young man, for listening. And then he said, I like listening to your lectures, but there's never a chance to ask any questions. And I said, well, that's true. He said, so can I ask one now? I thought, yeah, go ahead. He said, I'm only 9 years old, so it may not be a very philosophical question, but no one in the whole wide world has been able to answer my question, even mom and dad. So I said, okay. So he hesitated for a moment, and he said, Maharaj, why does Krishna wear a peacock feather? And I said, that's actually a very nice question. And I said, well, one afternoon when Krishna woke up after resting in the forest, his cowherd friends were all asleep, so he decided to wake them up by playing his flute. And when Krishna started playing his flute, it enchanted the many peacocks that were wandering around Govardhan Hill. And they started dancing in great happiness. Then I quoted Rupa Goswami's Ujvala Nilamani to this young boy, 1089. Yogamaya Purnamasi, she once said to Krishna, quote, seeing your glistening peacock feather crown, the peacocks think you are a blue rain cloud, and they begin to dance with jubilant abandon, unquote. Then I continued. So Krishna was pleased with all these thousands of peacocks dancing, and he encouraged them by his kind glances and sweet smiling. And the peacocks, I told the boy, they were so full of gratitude that one of them went up to him and touched his feet. And the peacock said, please, Krishna, will you dance with us? So Krishna happily accepted his request, and along with his cowherd boyfriends, started dancing very beautifully with all the peacocks. And witnessing this, all the animals in the forest were completely mesmerized by Krishna's dancing. The acarayas, they say that in fact, Krishna's dancing was so overwhelming that some of the peacocks fainted. When I said that, I could hear the boy laughing. So this went on for quite some time, and eventually the peacocks danced until they became exhausted. But Krishna went on dancing for many days and nights. Actually, one acharya says for a night of Brahma. And when Krishna finally stopped dancing, the king of the peacocks was so grateful that Krishna had given them so much of his precious time that he approached the Lord and offered him what is most dear to peacocks, their most prized possession, their gorgeous peacock feathers. He offered Krishna some feathers. So out of gratitude, Krishna lovingly accepted that humble offering, and he placed one of those peacock feathers in his hair. And since that time, Krishna always wears a peacock feather in his head. And the boy was silent. I said, just do it there? He said, yeah, wow. And then I said, but there's another deeper much more esoteric explanation why Krishna wears a peacock feather in his hair. And the boy said, "What's that?" So I said, 200 years ago, there was a highly respected Vaishnava living in Vrindavan. He was a poet, a scholar, and his name was Ramakrishna Prabhu. And he wrote an authorized commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam. It's called Pranima Manjari. And in his commentary to the verse 10:21:5, he wrote as follows. Radha Priya Mayur Asya Patram Radhe Shana Prabham Bibarti Shirasa Krishnasa Tasyas Chuda Nibam Yata. He wrote, quote, "The peacocks in Sri Radha's kunja are very dear to her, and the dark centers of their plumes are the same color as her eyes. Krishna wears a peacock feather on his head so that, through the eyes of the peacock plume, he may have the good fortune of her glance upon him always." Wow, what a verse. So I said to the boy, I was kind of thinking of the verse, and then I'm talking to this boy. So I said to him, "Is that okay?" He said, "Yes, I prefer this second explanation." I said, "But you're only 9 years old. Wasn't that a little bit over your head?" He said, "No, Maharaj. I chant 16 rounds a day. It's all very clear." Hare Krishna. So after that call, a thought came to my mind to speak on the peacocks of Braj, the peacocks of Vrindavan. Because I realized that in so many ways, actually, the peacocks, they're an integral part of the Lord's pastimes. I mean, the peacock feather is always on Krishna's head. So, to begin with, about the peacocks in Braj, they're mentioned in one of the very first verses of Vrindavan Mahimamrita, Shataka 1, so text number 7, the 7th verse of that illustrious scripture by Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati, which is so popular in our ISKCON movement. And there, Saraswati says, "I meditate on Vrindavan, resounding with the cuckoo's 5th note and the playful sound of the flute, full of dancing peacocks and blossoming creepers and vines, replete with graceful, shining bowers, and colorful with flocks of birds and deer, all endowed with various attracted rivers, ponds, and Govardhan Hill." It's all endowed with, this Vrindavan, with various attractive rivers and ponds and Govardhan Hill, and dancing peacocks, full of them. Actually, the peacocks, I determined, the peacocks are just as important to Krishna as are the cows, the cowherd boys, the cowherd girls, Nanda and Yashoda, etc. All these personalities play various roles in pleasing Krishna with their loving sentiments. Just like in our own lives, love is so important. Love makes the world go round, they say, in this world. But what is our love composed of? A variety of love. We have the love of our mother, we have the love of our father, our sister, our brothers, our aunts, our uncles, our grandpa, our grandma, great-grandpa, great-grandma. There's different types of love that make us feel satisfied. So Krishna's the same way. There's varieties of ways we can serve him that please him with our love. The cows, the cowherd boys, the cowherd girls, Nanda and Yashoda, they're all important. They all make the love complete in Vrindavan. So we should understand that, the birds, the peacocks, the cuckoos, the various birds, we shouldn't simply think of them as birds. Rather, many of them are great liberated sages, far beyond the modes of material nature. Either they're nitya siddhas, they're eternally liberated souls, or they perfected their Krishna consciousness through Shraddhan Bhakti and Raganuga Bhakti and Prem Bhakti and came back to the spiritual world. But even someone who comes back to the spiritual world, technically according to our Goswamis, according to Srila Prabhupada, they're also addressed as Nitya Siddha, eternally liberated souls. It's interesting. So, the birds, they're special. Again, Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati confirms this in Vrindavan Mahimamrita, Panchamam Shatakam, the fifth chapter. He says, quote, I offer respects to Vrindavan, on whose trees some great intelligent yogis, after spitting upon liberation, mukti, and all material goals, have become birds in Vrindavan and rejoice, chirping loudly, thus soundly refuting with elaborate, clear logic all material goals and the means to attain them. So these birds are special. Actually, the fact that the peacocks can actually offer something tangible to Krishna, like feathers, is significant. Not all the animals going to detail here, not all the animals in Vrindavan have that luxury of offering something like tangible to Krishna. There's an interesting reference to this in Shastra, a pastime that one time the gopis were walking through the Vrindavan forest, and they were observing all of Vrindavan's wonderful creatures. And one gopi, she said to another, quote, these deer, who by nature are attracted to sweet music, are drawn to Krishna by the bewildering sound of his flute. When they see his beautiful form and extraordinary dress, they become mesmerized, and with their gopi-like eyes cast glances of love to Nanda Nandana. Like a mystical net, these bashful glances successfully draw him close to them. Having attained his association, they perform Krishna's puja with, quote, the wicks of their glances and the ghee of their love. Oh, how wonderful. The deer. They do puja, but with the, instead of the lamp, with the wick of their glances and the ghee of their love. Their sentiments. Of course, that's perfect. But another gopi said, yes, but whereas the deer, they offer loving glances, the peacocks offer something more tangible. Their beautiful feathers, which Krishna always bears upon his head. Yeah. So she was thinking this is more tangible. The glances are nice, but somehow she's thinking there's something tangible there. Of course, Krishna accepts both offerings. Now, the acaryas point out that these peacock feathers are not only beautiful, and we know they are. When we go on Parikrama in Vrindavan, walking around, whenever we see a peacock feather, every devotee runs for it. It's just naturally beautiful. But the peacock feathers are not only beautiful, but they play a very important part in awakening a devotee's love for Krishna. How does a peacock feather awaken our love for Krishna? Well, the nectar of devotion. Srila Prabhupada says that things that help to awaken our love for Krishna are called Udipana. Different objects connected to Krishna. Those things which are an impetus to remember Krishna, like a dark cloud or a peacock feather or a yellow cloth, like that, those things are called Udipana. And of course, Prabhupada's nectar of devotion is a summary study of Srila Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So at that point, when Prabhupada's talking about Udipanas, or things that remind us of Krishna and help awaken our love for Krishna, Prabhupada quotes Rupa Goswami. Udipanas tute prokta bhavam udipa yantiye. He says, quote, those things which awaken ecstatic love are called Udipana. There's some authorized statement backing this up. So Srila Prabhupada says that Udipana is division of Vaibhava. And Vaibhava is defined as, quote, the cause of relishing attachment to Krishna, unquote. The cause of relishing attachment to Krishna. So this is a little technical, but it's the science of Krishna consciousness, and we should be well versed in these things. It's important to know how the process works. It gives us more faith. So this concept of Vaibhava and Udipana, it's described by Rupa Goswami. It's technical, but again, Tatra Seja Vibha Vashtu Ratyas Vadana Hetaya Te Dvida Labana Eke Tatai Vido Panapare. He says, quote, the cause bringing about the tasting of love for Krishna is called Vaibhava. Vaibhava is divided into two categories: Alambana, support, and Udipana, awakening. So we're talking about Udipana. And there's a few practical examples of Udipana. Things that, oh, Krishna, you look at something, oh, Krishna. Things that remind you. And I'll share a few practical examples of Udipana that in our lives that remind us of Krishna. Things that act as a stimulant to awaken our love for Krishna. Because our love for Krishna is already there within the heart. It just has to be cleared of all the unwanted things, the anarthas, lust, anger, greed, material attachment, lust, etc. So, a few examples. And again, our source is Srila Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He says, Krishna's flute, his place of residence, Vrindavan Dhama, and his paraphernalia, like his peacock feather or his dress, are some of the impetuses, Udipana, which awaken ecstatic love for him. Wow. What would we know without Srila Rupa Goswami? Because he's a very intimate personality in the spiritual world. One of Srimati Radharani's personal attendants, Sri Rupa Manjari. So he knows these things. We're very grateful to him. Sudyartam mama dehasya jala shnanam karomyaham. Shri Rupa vak ashunda shnanam svatmana parishudaye. Quote, for purification of my physical body, I bathe regularly using water. However, for the complete purification of myself and my existence, I bathe in the nectarian words of Srila Rupa Goswami, unquote. So our conclusion here, after some technicalities, is that Krishna's peacock feathers are not only beautiful, but they play an important role in awakening our love for him. Just seeing them is a udipana, a stimulus for awakening love for Krishna. But the peacock's contribution to Krishna, and you could say Vrindavan itself for that matter, is not just their feathers. No, it's not just their feathers. They also sing very nicely. Of course, when you hear a peacock sing, we have here in where I am in the mountains in Maharashtra, in the early morning when before sunrise, I'm outside chanting, and just as the sun starts, the first rays of the sun come over the mountain, then the peacocks caw, caw, and I think, oh, I'm in Braj, I'm in Vrindavan. So it works. So they also sing, but it doesn't exactly sound like singing. Ah, ah. Well, I think I sound like a crow, but you know what peacocks sound like. But we're hearing their sound as something, it's not like, like a cuckoo bird or a parakeet. It's a different type of singing. But that's because we're hearing those sounds with our material senses. Krishna's peacocks, they actually sing. And only when our spiritual senses are awoken can we see and hear Vrindavan as it is. I read in The Harmonist, which of course again was published by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati during his lifetime, that we can only perceive the bluish black color of Krishna, that actual color with spiritual senses. What we're seeing is, something like that, but the real blue, the bluish black of Krishna, that we're not seeing. Because Krishna's body is spiritual. And to see something as it is spiritual, you need spiritual eyes. Of course, our eyes, to see Krishna, his associates, Vrindavan, we are seeing through Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. But that day that we purify our hearts and we have something to look forward to here, something, they say trust no future however bright in this world. That's true. But the future, our future in Krishna consciousness is very bright, because when all this material desires are gone from the heart, anartha nivritti, things that are obstacles to our association with Radha and Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it's all removed through the process of chanting Hare Krishna. Cheto, Dharpana, Marjana. Every day we're cleansing. Then when those spiritual senses, which means we have a spiritual body, because senses means you have a body. A body means you have senses. So those senses will see Krishna's bluish black form. When will that day be ours? And we'll hear the peacocks singing. Atashi Krishna Namadi, Nabhaved Gayam Indriyai, Sevan Mukha Hi Jivado, Swayam Eva Sparat Yada. It's one of the first verses you learn in the Bhakta program. And if we're quoting Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 17:131, the quote goes, "Therefore material senses cannot appreciate Krishna's holy name, form, qualities, and pastimes. When a conditioned soul is awakened to Krishna consciousness and renders service by using his tongue to chant the Lord's holy name and taste the remnants of the Lord's food, the tongue is purified, and one gradually comes to understand Krishna as he really is." So, the peacocks, their feathers are beautiful. They dance with the Lord. We'll hear later how they dance with Radha and Krishna together. And they sing so nicely. Actually, all the birds in Vrindavan sing very nicely. Because in the spiritual world, everything's perfect and complete. So everyone's service is of the highest excellence. It must be to please Krishna. Every creature is a connoisseur of a particular type of rasa, which gives pleasure to their Lord. They're perfectionists in the ultimate degree. And their perfection is imbued with pure love. Quality and quantity. So every bird sings nicely. In Shastra it's said that in the winter time in Vrindavan, the forests resound with the sweet sound of partridges. That's their time on the stage. There are different seasons in Vrindavan. Of course, mystically, all these seasons exist simultaneously in Vrindavan at one time, eternally. Here we wait. We look forward to, we don't look forward to certain seasons. But in Vrindavan, all the seasons, they exist simultaneously, eternally. When Radha and Krishna go through the forest, sometimes to increase their their love for each other, because the surroundings are important as an impetus for love. The ambience, the place, what's there facilitates love. So they sometimes walk through the winter season. Then they come into the autumn season. And then they'll maybe switch over to the spring season. And, like this, they go through different seasons. So in the winter time in Vrindavan, it's the partridges' turn. They're singing in those trees without any leaves. Partridges. And in the autumn, all the birds I was reading, in the autumn season, all the birds come together and sing, including peacocks, cuckoos, swans, partridges, datyuka. I don't know, I keep reading about datyuka birds. Couldn't figure out who they are. All glories to datyuka birds and parrots. They assemble and they sing together in a grand concert. Everyone in Vrindavan looks forward to the autumn. Because you can go to the forest and all these birds, these varieties of birds, they're singing together in a grand concert. And the acaryas, they write that they assemble, quote, under the unifying influence of Vrindavan. They're all different. They're all singing different melodies and different notes, but because it's under the unifying influence of Vrindavan, everyone's doing it for the pleasure of Krishna. It sounds very beautiful. Like a maestro in a symphony. If you go to a symphony concert, you look at all the variety of instruments, and there's the tubas, and there's the flutes, and there's the violins, and there's the drums, and the cellos. There's so many different, in a grand orchestra, so many different, and they all sound different. And during an orchestra playing, they're not all playing the same melody. They may play melodies that how could you say that, that the contrast is very beautiful. Different melodies, but whoever wrote it, they wrote it in such a way that although there's a different melody here and there, combined together under the direction of the maestro, it sounds so wonderful. Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, Mozart. It's very complicated, their music. All the different instruments. But under the direction of the maestro, it all comes together to sound very pleasing. So when the birds come together, the maestro, under the influence of Vrindavan, what's the influence of Vrindavan? Radha and Krishna. So because everything's being played for their pleasure, although different birds, different harmonies, different melodies, sounds wonderful. The unifying influence of Vrindavan. Everyone's cooperating very nicely together for the pleasure of Krishna. So the acaryas explain it in a stanza, in a shloka. Quote, and they are happy, all these birds, intoxicated by the divine atmosphere, their voices blending with the humming of bees and the aromatic breezes touching all the trees. All the birds of Vrindavan are great sages, and their songs are laden with timeless wisdom. It's not just the music, it's the purpose of the music, to glorify Krishna. Just like when we do kirtan. What is our purpose in doing kirtan? To chant Hare Krishna, to give pleasure to Krishna. One may not be very musically inclined, one may not have a very nice voice, but if there's that purity of purpose, everyone likes that devotee's kirtan. And I read in the Harmonist that sometimes Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when there was kirtan, just to train his devotees in this way, he would select someone who may have not had a very beautiful voice. You lead kirtan. Knowing that devotee had a very pure heart, you lead kirtan. No need for instruments. Sometimes we get attached to the musical instrument and the sweetness of a devotee's voice, which is wonderful because, again, it's pleasing Krishna. But he was making a point. It's the purity of heart that's really important. Preaching is the essence. Books are the basis. Utility is the principle. But purity, That's so important. Purity is the main thing. We may offer something insignificant to Krishna, but if it's done with real love, Krishna is very happy to receive that. So, not only are these birds, great sages, and their songs are very beautiful, but they're laden with timeless wisdom. So beautiful. So, then Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, another one of our gurus, he gives us a very deep and very intimate insight to exactly what the singing birds are saying. Wow. Because we heard that their songs are laden with wisdom. So he goes so far, it's all connected, he goes so far as to say what the birds are saying when they sing. In Govinda Lilamrita, he writes, the Datyuka, there we go again, the Datyuka birds, they sing Kova, Kova, and they sing Kavava, Kavava. Kova means who else is as well behaved or extraordinary as Krishna. And Kvava means where else but in Vrindavan does he play? Kvava. Where else but in Vrindavan does he play? This is what they're singing. And the joyful peacocks, they sing Keka, Keka. And they're saying, who K, other than Krishna, can lift the mountain of Radha's patience? And what other lady, Ka, than Radha, can chain down the maddened elephant, Krishna? Wow. And that last peacock statement, Ka, what other lady than Radha can chain down the maddened elephant, Krishna? That statement by the peacocks is so true. Because Radharani, we know, Krishna's the supreme controller. By definition, in a dictionary, God is the supreme controller. But in our Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy, we hear that, God's controlled by love. And who has the greatest love for Krishna, the purest love for Krishna? Vrindavaneshwari Srimati Radharani, Mahabhav. So she's able to chain down the maddened elephant, Krishna. He's mad with love for her. By her love. And where is that stated? It's stated by Srila Sanatana Goswami in his Krishna Lilashtava. Adaradita Radesha Radhika Pana Balaba Radharaman Bande Tvam Radhika Premanirjita. O Lord Krishna, O Master of Srimati Radharani, Radha intently worships you and cherishes you, considering you more dear to her than her own life breath. O enjoyer of Srimati Radharani, you become conquered by the exalted pure love of Sri Radha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Vrindavaneshwari Srimati Radharani ki. Now other birds, they also sing in this autumn chorus. I remember the first time I went to a symphony orchestra. My parents, they loved that type of thing. I never actually became so attracted to it. I got distracted by some of the music in my youth. But I remember going to this symphony and I was like just a boy. I said, Mom, what's that instrument? What's that instrument? What's that instrument? My father was actually pointing them all out. So there's other birds in this autumn chorus of the birds in Vrindavan. Other birds are singing. So Kaviraj Goswami goes on to tell us what the birds are saying, these different birds are saying through their singing. He says, flocks of cuckoos, they repeatedly sing, coo-hoo, coo-hoo, on the fifth note. I can't do that. kuhu, kuhu, on the fifth note. But we know that that fifth note sounds like the enchanting vina of Cupid. Someone asks you, well, you know, you Hare Krishnas, you're always talking about this fifth note. So what is the fifth note? You can say the fifth note sounds like the enchanting vina of Cupid. In French we say le Cupidon. Cupid, the god of love in this world. That's what this fifth note sounds like. And the many parrots, that was the cuckoos, the many parrots in Vrindavan sing sweetly praising the beautiful bodily limbs of Krishna. That they direct their singing to describing, praising the beautiful limbs of Krishna. Wow, so many details. In this way, all the birds sing together. Different birds for the pleasure of Krishna, a wonderful spiritual harmony. So it's so wonderful, isn't it? That everything in Vrindavan can be glorified to the umpteenth degree. A partridge in a pear tree. It's from a Christmas song. A cuckoo bird, a peacock. Everything in Vrindavan can be glorified because everything in Vrindavan is personal and is imbued with the deepest love for Krishna, but just expressing that love in different ways. The gopas, the gopis, the cows again, the birds, the bees, the trees. Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati, in his Vrindavan Mahimamrita, it's interesting, he's constantly glorifying the trees of Vrindavan. In one verse in Vrindavan Mahimamrita, he writes, quote, "Whose heart would not be enchanted by Vrindavan, where Shri Radhika Madan Mohan enjoy many pastimes, where there are many trees and flowering vines, where the ground is paved with jewels, and where the birds, deer, and other animals are maddened with ecstatic transcendental bliss." What to speak of trees? Even the dirt of Vrindavan is glorious. It's called Chintamani Dham. Chintamani Pakarasaramasu Kalpaviksha. In that verse from Brahma Samhita, first thing is the dirt. We say that the dust, Vrindavan's a little dusty there, and that the dusty paths that the Lord and his associates walk upon. Actually, wherever Krishna walks, the gopis who have the save of cleansing the kunjas. Of course, nothing needs to be cleansed in Vrindavan; it's all absolute. But they're sweeping the kunjas. They're sweeping outside of their homes. They're sweeping like that, even sweeping. Whenever they come across a footprint of Krishna, who's walked through the forest, they don't touch it. They leave it. This imprint of his lotus feet with all the different symbols on his feet. Gopis don't cleanse. They don't sweep there. They leave that. You can see Krishna's footprints, Balaram's footprints, all over Vrindavan, and they're in the dust. That Chintamani dust, we call that actual dust Braj-renu. And that Braj-renu, according to tradition, there's 5 personalities who grant us entrance into Vrindavan. Lord Shiva, Govardhan Hill, and one of those things at the Jamuna River. One is that the dust, to pray to the dust, please grant me entrance. Physically, we do that out of respect. But more importantly, spiritually, we want to enter, have the proper mood, and we want to stay there one day. We don't want to leave. So even that dust, what to speak of the gopis and the gopas, and then the animals and the birds, and you come down to the tiniest element, the dust. It's also glorious. in my research, I came across a very famous devotee. His name was Mahakavi Dhundiraj. Interesting name. Mahakavi Dhundiraj. And he was born in the year, I think it was either 1699 or 1700. And he's very much appreciated, even today, by respected sadhus in our tradition. He wrote the following, a very famous verse glorifying the dust of Vrindavan. And in essence, the verse explains why he thinks that there's nothing in this universe comparable to the dust of Vrindavan. And the Sanskrit's quite complicated, so I'll just recite what he wrote. Quote, "This entire universe contains valuables, such as the desire-fulfilling Kalpavriksha tree of heaven, the great golden mountain Meru, and the most precious jewels on the hoods of Anantashesh. However, even with all these valuables, this universe can never be on par with Sri Vrindavan Dhama. Why so? Because history is proof that even the tiny particles of dirt taken from random locations within Vrindavan got transformed into our gigantic universe after they entered the mouth of a tiny little child." Krishna. Isn't that wonderful? We all remember, we know that Krishna ate dirt, he ate the Brajreno, and then Mother Balaram told on him, and then Mother Yasoda came to see in his mouth, and that, what did she see? She saw the entire universe. The idea being those little tiny specks of dust, they'd become the universe. So this poet is saying that if just a few particles of Brajreno, Vrindavan dust, got transformed into the entire universe, then what is the potency of all the dust, all the dirt in Vrindavan Dhama? So the dust, little particles, that's the lila, the pastime. Then she saw he takes it poetically that she saw the universe. So what to speak of all the dust in Vrindavan? All the universes, these vast universes in creation, they can't compare to a few specks of dust in Vrindavan. We thank that poet for such an interesting perspective. Hare Krishna. Brajreno ki. So there's another peacock pastime that I would like to share with all of you. But this time, it involves not only Krishna, but Srimati Radharani as well. Previously, he was dancing like a peacock. But in this particular pastime, Radha and Krishna are dancing like peacocks. And this pastime, it took place in the beautiful forest of Mayura-vana. Mayura-vana. Mayura-vana is one of the sub-forests of Vrindavan. We have the 12 main forests, then you have sub-forests, then sub-forests, and then sub-forests ad infinitum. This is, Mayura-vana is a sub-forest, in case anyone ever asks you. And this pastime that took place in this particular forest, it greatly pleased Radha and Krishna's gopi girlfriends and all the creatures of the forest. Now, fortunately, I found the prana mantra for this sub-forest, Mayuravana, in our deeply respected Narayana Bhatta Goswami's Braj Bhakti Vilas, 10th chapter, verse number 60. He writes about Mayuravana. Nama kalara samyukta Mayuravana samshaka Namo priya shukadhyaya manohara swarupine. Quote, O forest named Mayura-vana, replete with white lotuses. Obeisances to you, obeisances to you, O mind enchanting forest. That's how he describes. O mind enchanting forest, replete with the happiness of Srimati Radharani. Unquote. So we're visiting a special place today. It's a mind enchanting forest, and it's replete. It's imbued with the happiness of our beloved Srimati Radharani. Now, I also found a mantra for a kunda, a lake in that forest called Mayura-kunda. Krishna Gopi Krita Snana Sambhava Tirtha Samshaka Nana Sarasi Jakina Deva Tirtha Namoshrute. Sri Narayana Bhatta Goswami says, O holy place, born out of the bathing of Krishna and the gopis, O kunda, filled with abundant lotuses, O tirtha of the gods, O tirtha of the gods, obeisances to you. That's Braja Bhakti Vilas 10, I think it's 61 or 62. So one time, Radha and Krishna were sitting in a very beautiful kunja, very beautiful grove in Mayura-vana. And they were speaking together, they're exchanging smiles, and while they were being served by their gopi friends. When all of a sudden, the beauty of Radha and Shyam's divine forms, and I was reading the sweetness of their voices, attracted the local peacocks. And at first the peacocks just were mesmerized by the divine forms of Radha and Krishna and their sweet voices as they were talking together. The peacocks were mesmerized, just gazing at them for some time. And then, again, the peacocks started to dance. And word spread throughout the peacock community. And more peacocks came and started dancing. And there were thousands of peacocks. And it's interesting, they formed concentric circles that moved in opposite directions around the divine couple. They made circles around the divine couple, concentric circles, and one circle was going one way, and the other circle of peacocks was going the other way. Similar to the way gopis move in the rasa dance. If you study the rasa dance, then it's pointed out that there's concentric circles of some gopis going in one direction, other gopis in another direction, and then two lines of gopis going in one direction, two lines going in the other direction, like it just goes out like this, so beautiful. So the Shastra says that the peacocks were very happy. One acharya writes, quote, the peacocks, inspired by their own sankirtan of the holy names and the beauty of the divine couple, relished transcendental bliss, manifesting symptoms of ecstasy that any yogi would envy. I'll recite that again. The peacocks, inspired by their own sankirtan of the holy names and the beauty of the divine couple, relished transcendental bliss, manifesting symptoms of ecstasy that any yogi would envy. Unquote. So then more and more, tens of thousands of peacocks joined this Sankirtan festival. And as Radha and Krishna moved amongst them, the divine couple appeared like a bolt of lightning in a rain cloud, both of whom used the thunder of their words to encourage the birds. They appeared like a bolt of lightning in a rain cloud, both of whom, Radha and Krishna, used the thunder of their words to encourage the birds, the peacocks. Finally, prompted by the peacock's glances and the gopis' cheers, Radha and Krishna together danced like peacocks amongst the thousands of peacocks. The same moves they were doing. It's described perfectly imitating the peacock's steps and movements. Whew. And now after this dance performance, which went on for a long time, Radha and Krishna refreshed themselves in Mayura-kunda. The acarayas say that, quote, "The water of which will forever be blessed by this sweet exchange between the divine couple and the peacocks." Now actually Radha and Krishna performed the dance like the peacocks in various places. In Mayuravan, in Govardhan. I was reading also in Varshana. Just as they performed the rasa dance in many places throughout the forests of Vrindavan. The comparison was made there. We know many times we've discussed how the rasa lila, Krishna's rasa dance, we tend to think of it as one dance, but there, of course, there is a Maha Rasa dance, but there's many rasa dances in different seasons, in different places of Vrindavan. So in the same way, it's interesting, Radha and Krishna, they dance like peacocks, with the peacocks, in different parts of Vrindavan. The acharyas say that, quote, "Just as the gopis play music to accompany Radha and Krishna's rasa dance, these gopis also accompany the divine couple's peacock dance performances with appropriate songs in different parts of Vrindavan and in different ragas. The Malhar raga and the Mega raga are described as melodic modes associated with the monsoon season. The Malhar raga in the monsoon season, in a particular forest, it's sung in the day, and the Mega raga is sung towards the night. Some insight into the mood and the technicalities of awakening our love for Radha and Krishna and for Radha and Krishna's pleasure. Now, I once visited this Mayura-vana some years ago, and I saw that on the bank of Mayura-kund, there's a temple dedicated to the Pandavas. Although when I asked some questions, there's no recorded history of them visiting or residing that particular place during their stay in Braja, but I imagine probably they did because there's a temple dedicated to the Pandavas, but everyone's forgotten the actual history now. But taking an educated guess, we can say Pandavas were there, and therefore there's a temple. Was established by the devotees at that time. So it's a really interesting place to go, Mayura-vana. So please go. All these places we're describing, we're trying to increase your interest to go there, because each tirtha in Vrindavan has a particular pastime, particular bhav, and many instructions to help us advance in Krishna consciousness. Now, we will proceed with Peacock Leela. There's another very, very famous peacock pastime that took place at Morgar, more commonly known as Morkutir, which many of you know is very close to Varshana. We often pass by it on our Varshana parikrama. Sometimes we go up, sometimes we don't, because you have to go up this steep incline, this like steep hill to get to that lilasthan. And what is it? Well, we can understand in essence by hearing the prana mantra for Morkutir from Narayana Swami. Again, prana mantras are the essence. Like Vedanta Sutra, sutras are short verses which give the essence of the large texts there in Vedic scriptures, like the codes, Vedanta Sutra. Atato Brahma Jignasya. Now that you've come to the human form of life, now's the time for spiritual pursuit, self-realization. It's not a long, long verse with long commentary. Sutra means short. Vedanta Sutra. Explanation of Vedanta or Veda. So prana mantra is a quick insight into a personality or a lilasthan like that. So Morkutir. Kiritine namastubhyam. Mayura priya balaba. Shunam yayai mahat kutyai. Sikkandi padavesh mane. Narayana Swami. This is 457 of Braj Bhakti Vilas. O Krishna, with the beautiful crown of peacock feathers. O Lord, dear to the peacocks. Obeisances to you, O extremely beautiful Mor-kutir, decorated with the foot imprints of peacocks. Obeisances to you. Wow. So the prana mantra. There's also a prana mantra for a rasastali. Rasastali means a place where Radha and Krishna perform the rasa dance. There's a rasa mandala. Mandala means like a place. You see in Vrindavan, even sometimes in obscure, of course nothing's obscure, but something in the outer regions of Vrindavan, you'll be walking in a forest, there'll be a rasa mandala. There'll be, someone has built with wood or with rocks or cement, a very beautiful place for Radha and Krishna to dance, or to commemorate a dance there. You see these rasa mandalas all over Vrindavan. I mean, we were at Badrinath one time, and walking up this steep incline, there was a rasa stali, there was a rasa mandala for Radha and Krishna to dance. So there's a rasa mandala at Morkutir. Radha and Krishna, sometimes they come and do ras there, rasa lila. So Narayana Bhatta Goswami gives us the mantra. Namasaki same taya, he writes, Radha Krishnaya te namaha. Vimolot sava devaya braja mangala hetave. Quote, obeisances to Radha and Krishna, along with the Sakis, who bestow a spotless festival of rasa, and who are the ultimate cause of auspiciousness for Braj. That's particularly beautiful. Obeisances to Radha and Krishna, along with the Sakis, who bestow a spotless festival of rasa, and who are the ultimate cause of auspiciousness in Braj. Radha and Krishna are the ultimate cause of auspiciousness for Braja. So, again, this is a very well-known pastime. In essence, the acarayas say that peacocks are sometimes said to be Radha and Krishna's dance teachers. So one time at Morkutir, the divine couple, instead of just dancing like peacocks, they assumed the forms of transcendental peacocks. And when they started dancing, all the forest animals became so enchanted that the divine couple had taken such forms, like them. They all came to see the transcendental Leela from all over Vrindavan. It was crowded. There were two peacocks, a peacock and a peahen, dancing wonderfully. Radha and Krishna, all the forest animals of Braj. It was crowded. And they danced and they danced and they danced. And all the animals felt so content. Oh, they're just like us. They're just like us. So sweet. And it's such an important Leela, actually, that a few hundred years ago, Radharani appeared to a blind Vaishnava residing in a cottage, a bhajan kutir, at Morkutir. This is a very famous, well-known, and loved pastime. And she requested him to paint a painting of her dancing with Krishna along with the peacocks in that area. not as peacocks, but just dancing with the peacocks, Radha and Krishna. So the blind Vaishnava, he said, but Vrindavaneshwari, how can I paint? I'm blind. So she famously said to the painter, Baba, you have faith in my words to inspire all practicing devotees now and in the future. The same potency that guides your meditation will also guide your hand. Wow. The same potency that guides your meditation will also guide your hand. So by the mercy of Sri Radha, that blind devotee, he painted a very beautiful painting with his spiritual vision bestowed upon him by Sri Radha. And that painting is still there to this very day. You can go and you can see. You can see that painting done by that blind Vaishnava. The same potency that guides your meditation will also guide your hand. Now I'd like to share with you another pastime at Morgar, at Morkutir, that may not be so well known by devotees. As I mentioned, Morkutir actually rests upon a little hill next to Varshana. You could almost say it's part of Varshana. And one time, the cowherd boys, along with Krishna, they climbed up that hill, to Morkutir, because it gave them they could see the beauty of the surrounding area. But exhausted from the climb, they all became very hungry. So they're saying, Krishna, Krishna, please, give us something to eat. They're all day hungry. Give us something to eat. So Krishna, who's Yogeshwara, Krishna's the master. He's the master of mystic powers. So with his mystic powers, Krishna, he suddenly made baskets of ladus appear. So many baskets of laddu appearing. And as those baskets materialized, the gopas, they ran from one basket to another. It's described greedily devouring their contents. And it wasn't long before the boys had eaten to their full satisfaction. However, the baskets of sweets just kept popping out of thin air. Boom. So the cowherd boys, instead of eating the ladus, they took the ladus and began to toss the ladus back and forth to each other. Like you play ball. They couldn't eat them anymore. There were so many baskets. And they were running back and forth, you know. You can imagine the scene in your mind. And then they can't eat anymore. But the baskets keep popping up, so they're tossing the ladus in great happiness. And when the cowherd boys had finished their play at Morgar or Morkutir, the whole area was littered with broken sweets. While the gopas they were laying down in the shade of trees. It's described lovingly joking about their wonderful friend Gopal. Wonderfully joking about their wonderful friend Gopal. Unquote. The scripture says that this pastime happened on the 9th day of the waxing fortnight in the month of Bhadra. Okay, 2 more peacock pastimes before we finish. Or do we want to finish? No, we don't. But so there's a pastime place in Vrindavan called Dhana, D-A-N-A, by the locals. And once while playing with his friends there, Krishna hid from them during their play, like hide and go seek. And several of the boys, or let's say several groups of boys, started looking for him everywhere. They couldn't find him. And finally, one group of boys came upon a peacock feather on the ground. A peacock feather on the ground. And one boy, he held it up and he said, quote, Krishna must have danced here with the peacocks. In his exuberance, his own feather must have fallen from his turban. Boys, we're on the right track. Udipana. And actually, they were on the right track. As the boys scurried around, went around, they closed in on Krishna, who, having nowhere to hide in an open meadow, resorted to a type of, transcendental camouflage. Transcendental camouflage. Because in that meadow, there was one solitary banyan tree. And under that banyan tree, Krishna manifested his form as, quote, four-armed Lord Narayana, along with all his divine symbols in his hands. Plus, it's described a Kastubya and a crown. This reminds us of a very similar pastime, doesn't it, with the gopis? But this is happening at Dana. So when the boys spotted Krishna's, blackest effulgence from a distance, they all raced to be the first to touch him. But when they arrived at that banyan tree, they stopped short, seeing before them not Krishna, their friend Krishna, but Lord Narayana, the master of all creation. So they were struck with wonder to see this towering form, four-armed form of Lord Narayan, who was leaning casually upon his club and smiling at them fondly like a benevolent father. They're looking for Krishna, but they came across Lord Narayan, So the boys, they spontaneously bowed down to Lord Narayan. Then it's so cute. Then, still kneeling, full of wonder, and palms joined in respect, the cowherd boys just huddled together, not knowing what else to do. Running here and there, looking for Krishna. And they come across a meadow, and there's a banyan tree, and there's this black, effulgent person from a distance they can see. And they come closer. Oh, Lord Narayan. So they bow down, and then still kneeling, full of wonder and palms joined in respect, the boys just huddled together, not knowing what else to do. I really like that. And, they're staring like, what do we do now? So touched by his love for his quote-unquote bewildered friends, Krishna could not restrain himself any longer, like he did in the similar pastime with the gopis. He couldn't restrain himself because he just loved those boys so much. And he very quickly resumed his original form as a cowherd boy, and calling out, "Surprise!" he jumped up and ran to the grazing cows. Surprise! So brought back to life again, because they're like, by Krishna's clever trick, the boys jumped to their feet and they ran very excitedly after him, calling out, "I knew it was Gopal." Another boy, one boy was saying, "I knew it was Gopal." Another boy said, "Yeah, but I'm going to be the first to catch him." "Hey, I knew it was Gopal." "No, I knew it was Gopal." "No, I knew." "Well, anyway, I'm going to be the first to touch him." "No, you're not." Sakiras, remember? Sakiras. Sakyarati. The pastimes of the cowherd boys with Krishna. So finally, the other morning I read that every day Radharani would walk with her girlfriends from Varshana to Nandagram, where she would cook for Krishna. We've discussed this a number of times. And later in the morning, after cooking and serving Krishna his breakfast, she would go back to Varshana, to where she lived. So one day, for some reason, she didn't go to Nandagram to cook. She didn't go. She stayed in her room in Varshana. So the acharyas say that morning, Krishna felt very sad. sad that he couldn't start his day by seeing Sri Radha. So Mother Yasoda, she filled in, she cooked. And after Krishna had finished his breakfast, he went to his room, and then what did he do? He secretly sneaked out of Nandagram and he went to Varshana, all alone. And at Varshana, of course, there's the palace, King Vrishabhanu, Kirtiti Sundari's palace, where Sri Radha lives as a young girl. That palace has, let me remember, 32 rooms. So when Krishna arrived there, he wanted to see Radha. So what did he do? He climbed into a tree wherein he could see all the rooms in the palace. Now this reminds us of another pastime at Yavat, where Krishna climbs into a tree to find Radha, but maybe we'll tell that pastime in our next lecture. And that's more well known. But here, Krishna's at Varshana, not Yavat, he's at Varshana, climbing into a tree to look into the 32 rooms in the palace to see if Radharani's there. But he couldn't see her anywhere. So what did he do? He started to make the sound, the cooing of a peacock. And he imitated that sound very well. And we know he can do that because in Nectar Devotion, we read that one of Krishna's 64 qualities is that he's Bashavit. Bashavit. He has 64 outstanding qualities. And one of them is Bashavit. What is Bashavit? Krishna is expert in all languages. He can speak the language of the birds, the bees, demigods, human beings. So from somewhere in the Varshana palace, Radharani heard this cooing of a peacock. But she noticed that there was something very different about this cooing from this peacock. So she told her palace servants that I'm just going to go outside for a moment to see this peacock who's singing so sweetly. Okay. Now as soon as Radharani came out of the palace, there was Krishna standing next to a tree, singing so sweetly like a peacock. So there they are together. No one knows they're together. So the divine couple went for a walk. And they have, they're meeting all the time, but they're meeting secretly, parikyaras. Unmarried couples meeting secretly in different parts of Sri Vrindavan Dhama. And because that's a parikya bhav, it's much more intense, and therefore it's much full of more rasa, more love. So they went for a walk to one of their favorite places. They went to a nearby cave. And they entered into that beautiful cave where they spent time, it said, laughing and joking in each other's company. Now after a while, time was going on. Radharani was supposed to have gone to Nandagram to cook and serve Krishna and be back well before this time. Radharani's mother, Kirtiti Sundari, she's saying, well, Radharani hasn't come back from Nandagram. It's been quite some time. She's thinking, I haven't seen my daughter for hours. Where could she be? So she went to her room, to Radha's room. She wasn't there. She asked all the maidservants, where's my Prandanahe, the Lord of my life, Radharani? No one knew. So Shrimati Kirtida Sundari, she followed Radharani's footprints out of the palace and through the Braj-renu, through the dust of Vrindavan. She has particular marks on her feet as well that identifies her as Radharani. She followed those footprints all the way to the entrance of the cave where the divine couple were. And as she entered the cave, she called out, Sri Radha, are you there? Sri Radha, are you there? And hearing her mother's voice, Radharani became afraid. She said to Krishna, my mother is here. Krishna said, don't worry. I know what to do. And listen to this. he quickly transformed himself into a beautiful, most gorgeous peacock. And he jumped into Radharani's lap. And as Kirtida Sundari approached, she found her daughter Radharani sitting very peacefully, petting this cooing peacock in her lap. The peacock was, very content. Cooing, this cooing peacock, very content, cooing, petting the peacock. So when Kirtida Sundari asked Radharani, "What are you doing in this cave?" So Radharani explained that while she was sitting in her room that morning in Varshana, she just decided she wasn't going to go to Nandagram to cook. But as time went on, she got a little bored, so she decided to come to this place, which she said, I visit from time to time. It's a very beautiful, very peaceful cave. And she said, "Mother, when I came in the cave, I found this very beautiful peacock." So Kirtida Sundari said to Radha, "Okay, Lali, come home now, and you can take prasadam." So Radharani stood up, picked up the peacock, and gave it a very long, long, loving embrace. Then put it down and went back to Varshana with her mother. Hare Krishna. Wow. Peacock, Leela, and Braj. Again, every living entity in Braj is intricately connected to Radha and Krishna's loving pastimes. So it's been nice to discover just how important are the peacocks in Radha and Krishna's pastimes today. So let us finish these most wonderful Vrindavan peacock pastimes with some words from He who is revealing the Dham to us. The spiritual master reveals the Dham. So who is revealing the Dham to all of us? Our beloved Srila Prabhupada. What more fitting way to end the class today than to hear from Srila Prabhupada. And this is Krishna book, chapter 20. In the rainy season, when the clouds appear for the first time, the peacocks dance with joy upon seeing them. The peacocks can be compared to persons who are very much harassed in the materialistic way of life. If they can find the association of a person engaged in the loving devotional service of the Lord, they become enlightened and dance just like peacocks. We have practical experience of this. Many of our students were dry and morose previous to their coming to Krishna consciousness. But having come in contact with devotees, they are now dancing just like jubilant peacocks. By your grace, Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for everything, Srila Prabhupada. Wow. So today, we'll finish here. And thank you so much again for giving me this opportunity. And we'll be back in a few days. I think, I mentioned in the class Yavat, so there we go. I'll speak about Radha and Krishna's pastimes in Yavat next time. So, all right, well, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari, Srimati Radharani ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Sri Vrindavan Dhama ki, all the glorious peacocks of Sri Vrindavan Dhama ki. Back home, back to Godhead, to Goloka Vrindavan Dhama ki, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Jai Jai Sri Sri Radhe Shyam. See you soon, Prabhus. Hare Krishna. Thank you.